guess what? It was never enough, April, at the end of the day. It was never enough. Like I couldn't eat up enough of it. But it played its role throughout my journey until all of that stuff kind of fizzled out. And it was like, oh, you're still 400 pounds mentally. You are still carrying the weight of the world. You are still carrying all of these insecurities, self doubts, these triggers, these childhood traumas, these life experiences. But now they're amplified because you have all of this attention, and those insecurities are now screaming at the top of their lungs. I had to take care of my body in order to perform properly, in order to maintain the proper weight as a gymnast. My father was well into his lowest part of his addiction, alcoholism, and he became a heroin addict. Eating and blowing up just caused me to eat more because I became more depressed, more upset, more disappointed in myself, having more shame and guilt. To be a 400-pound woman that sat on the sidelines of her family and in the background, literally sitting, to losing a dramatic amount of weight, to becoming incredibly active, working out twice a day. I now was forced to sit still for 6 weeks. And I did not realize how much that would derail my mental health. I made a very poor decision to step out on my marriage and have an affair with him.
So happy to see you and finally get to do this with you. This is so
I
exciting.
know.
I was telling my husband, I said, remember back in in our old house in Tennessee, and I was like just getting into this idea that I was going to do YouTube one day. And we set up like a whole studio upstairs in my house. And
Right.
I was like, I'm going to feature guests. And it's when you were just starting your journey, your weight loss journey. And I remember
Mm-hmm.
thinking like, I would love to have her on the channel as a guest. I had no idea really what my topics were going to be yet, but I just wanted to really talk about people who were like living their like power and like finding their power and
Right.
empower others through it. And so then I think, I don't know if you remember, but I asked you if you would be interested and you were like, of course I would, it'd be awesome. And then we just never really, well, I fizzled anyway, but we never really connected to make it go forward. And then I
Right.
started blushing Phoenix and I was like, this isn't necessarily like a
Right.
blushing thing, but this is definitely something that I think people would be able to relate to as something that's a social hindrance that you're overcoming. And so
Right.
your message would be very powerful. And then something else happened and it didn't really work out. And then we reconnected again recently
Yeah.
and it was like two totally different like places in life. And I'm like, I would
Yeah.
love to still have you on the podcast. And you're like, let's do it. And I'm like,
Yes.
here we are.
I was so excited to do it back then too. We talked about it, but like timing is everything. And it would have been really cool to have that podcast back then because then we could compare it to where we are both at today. But I think timing is everything. I was so unwell at that time. Like my mental health was so like so it would have been interesting to see what my I did some interviews back then, but I look at some of the interviews I was showing a friend the other day and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't even watch this because I was so not in a good place. You know what I mean? Like everybody's like, oh, you lost all this weight and you must feel like $1 million. And I was like, I thought I did. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I'm worse off than ever. So, like timing is everything because I'm in a much better place today.
And I love it.
So,
This is something that I just recently interviewed a friend of mine who's an entrepreneur, and it's really neat to even see him. I interviewed him like a year ago and even
mhm.
see where he is today and where we both are today. And then we were even joking. I don't remember if I actually recorded this part because we might have just been chit-chatting at the end, but I just said, it's going to be so fun to like watch these episodes back like another
Right.
year from now or 10 years from now and be like, what the heck? We had no idea what we were doing. And that's
Right.
just, the story of life. And part of why I really wanted to have your voice and your story on Ignite is because as I'm rebranding some things here at Ignite, it was Blushing Phoenix. We still have the Blushing Phoenix side, but it evolved into Ignite, which was people who didn't really want to live in that headspace anymore and wanted to be
Right.
like, my life is so much more than this. And I have real problems, like real people, and beyond
Right.
just this one thing. And now
That's so
Ignite
true.
has really evolved into this, like, this is for people who are in that messy middle, who have been in the messy middle, who might not be in the messy middle of certain things anymore, but that's just what
Mhm.
our life is. It's always going to be the journey is the destination. The journey, a lot of times, is the messy middle. So
Right. Right.
I'm really excited to let you share your story here because we'll go ahead and jump into some of these questions because for
Okay.
people who don't know, you're transforming Noelle on Instagram and you
Mhm.
started this handle and this story on Instagram years ago, 2016, 2017-ish.
2016. Yeah, it was like August, August or September of 2016. Two or so months into my journey, I started.
And that was you sharing about weight loss specifically. So, just for people who don't know, and really just to get us at the beginning of like where this public figure part of you started and the influencer side of you started, tell about like what was your moment that was like, I'm going to put this on Instagram and start talking about it. Why did you decide this is the moment? And what was going on in your life then that actually got you into that place of saying, I'm doing it, I'm going to share about it. And then it started gaining momentum.
When I started my journey, I had started and failed so many times in my weight loss journey, and I was so tired of failing, and I wanted to do something different. I had tried so many different avenues, and nothing was working. And I was actually following another influencer that lost a lot of weight on Instagram, and she had documented her journey on Instagram. And I thought, oh my gosh, she inspires me. Maybe sharing my journey will help influence me to be accountable, right? So I thought, I'll go ahead and start this page. Who knows what will happen with it? But if I can get some of my friends and family to follow along on my journey, maybe they will inspire me to keep going because they will check in with me, hopefully in a healthy way. So I decided to just start the Instagram page, having no idea where it would take me. My first post was I was about 390 pounds. I started at 414 and my first, maybe lighter, but I had a transformation photo. That was my first post. And it kind of just blew up overnight. Like within 2 or 3 days, I had like 500 followers, people I didn't even know. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm still pushing 400 pounds. How would people be inspired by any of this? In my eyes, I didn't expect to gain a large following at all. I didn't even expect to become I'm not a fan of the word influencer, but I didn't expect to become an influencer of any sort. But I will tell you that part of my journey is crucial to the success of my journey. And if you want me to continue, I will say why.
Yeah, I was gonna
uh,
say, do you think that that helped really spur you on because now you have
oh
like
yeah,
all these eyes on you?
yes, absolutely. I was I was so mentally unwell that I was getting all of this attention I hadn't gotten in a really long time. The only success at that point in my life, I was what, 36? The only success at that point in my life was being a competitive gymnast as a child. I had nothing that I was proud of at that point in my life. So hearing somebody say they were inspired by me, motivated by me, they were proud of me, that only encouraged me to keep on going. And I truly believe those words on Instagram, actually don't even truly believe, I know that those words on Instagram helped me be as successful as I was. That amount of love and support that I was getting from everyone was incredible and played such a huge role in my success because I just kept getting all of this love and support. But guess what? It was never enough, April. At the end of the day, it was never enough. Like I couldn't eat up enough of it. But it played its role throughout my journey until all of that stuff kind of fizzled out, and it was like, oh, you're still 400 pounds mentally. You are still carrying the weight of the world. You are still carrying all of these insecurities, self doubts, these triggers, these childhood traumas, these life experiences. But now they're amplified because you have all of this attention, and those insecurities are now screaming at the top of their lungs.
I I am so excited to dive deeper into some of those things as we're unpacking parts of your story. You talked about being a child athlete, competitive. Talk a little bit about that and how you think that shaped some of like just your own life, being able to be on your weight loss journey and the pros and cons.
Throughout my childhood, I was a competitive gymnast. And if we know anything about gymnastics, coaches are incredibly tough on you about your weight, what you're eating, your performance. I remember, I'll never forget one of my coaches. One day I was, getting ready for competition that weekend. It was a Friday and we had 4 hours of training that day. And she pulled me to the side and she goes, "What'd you eat yesterday? Go ahead and talk me through what you ate yesterday." I mean, this was a normal conversation. It was like, this is what I had, blah, blah, blah. They could tell in my performance that day that I had not been eating and drinking properly. I think I had like a bowl of ice cream the night before. So, could they really tell? Who knows? But in my head, food was such a huge part of my journey as a gymnast. I had to take care of my body in order to perform properly, in order to maintain the proper weight as a gymnast. But that also was an issue at home as well. So I was receiving it on both ends. At home, my mom was very, very strict about our intake and maintaining a healthy, you know, body, healthy weight. And then to have it at gymnastics as well was incredibly tough. The coaches were pretty hard on you. And I remember just always being concerned about what I put in my mouth. So once I quit gymnastics, it was like, give me all the foods I didn't eat as a child. I would go to birthday parties and not indulge cake and ice cream because I was so afraid of the response I would get from my coaches. I remember my very first competition. I think I was like 7, 8 years old, and we were away. We were in Santa Barbara, California, and I'd ordered a milkshake for dinner in front of my coaches the day before competition. And I was mortified because nobody else did that. I did. And it was just like I was pulled to the side and they were like, what is this? That kind of started the whole you have to take care of your body always. You cannot indulge. You cannot, the fact that I couldn't even indulge, I wasn't taught a healthy relationship with food. I was just taught you will always eat healthy no matter what for training and for gymnastics. So that played a big role. On top of that, to be, at a home where weight was such an important role in our lives as well, and maintaining a healthy weight, that was a double whammy for me, unfortunately.
How old were you? What were the ages of your gymnast time?
My mom started me at 3 years old. I'm trying to remember when I quit. I want to say 16, 15, 16.
Yeah, a good chunk of like
Yes.
adolescence.
Yes, absolutely. It was my life. It was my entire world. And I had to quit to enjoy my adolescence because I was training 5 or 6 days a week, depending on whether or not we were in competition season.
Did you,
So
when you came out of gymnastics and you started to have those indulgences and like really start to be like, I'm free to do what I want, is that kind of where a shift happened and you started putting on weight and then you noticed it? And was there like a mental aspect of it that was like, whoa, something's happening to my body? Or what did that part of your journey look like when you actually started putting the weight on?
that was such a crucial time in my life because we were in the process of, shortly after that, we moved to Tennessee. There was so much going on. There was a lot of stress going on. My father was well into his lowest part of his addiction, alcoholism, and he became a heroin addict. And there was so many different things going on at that time. I don't think I recognized that there was a problem because, again, there was so much going on in our family. And my mom was trying to do her best to get us away from California and save us from, what my father was doing. So I think it didn't hit me until I arrived in Tennessee, and I was 17 years old and realized in a few photos I had seen where I was like, oh, I mean, I packed it on so quickly, April. I was just so excited to indulge on all of the foods that I had been suppressed from, in a sense. So I saw these photos and I thought, whoa, what are you doing here? And it did not change me at all. If anything, it caused me to spiral even worse into food addiction. And so that just kept on going until I met Chris. And then we had infertility problems. And then we had, adoption problems. But we'll go into all of that issue later on. But it just continued to spiral out of control because nothing was turning out the way I wanted it to. And I was just using food to cope with all of my stressors in life.
And so is that something that feels like it's something you can control and it's something that gives you that instant gratification? And that was kind of the spiral of the consumption?
I don't really know, honestly. I know that it just made me feel good. It made me feel better. It was a temporary fix to all of my anxiety, and eating and blowing up just caused me to eat more because I became more depressed, more upset, more disappointed in myself, having more shame and guilt about the fact that here I was, this competitive gymnast that took incredible care of her body. I mean, I was so delayed, in my puberty because my body fat percentage was so low. I mean, that alone was huge. And so to know that I went from taking such great care of myself to now blowing up, my health literally blowing up, it was devastating. And I just continued to spiral, and things continued to not turn out the way I had hoped or wished that they had.
It's interesting to hear and go into these parts of your stories with you, especially for people who do support you and follow you on Instagram, and even for others, because part of with Blushing Phoenix, what I would always tell people is like, you're so much more than blushing. But my topic that I always talked about was blushing, 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 blushing. Even though
Right.
I was healing from that, I still will flush, I still turn red. It's just part of my life. It's not, it doesn't
Right.
define me, but I almost felt like boxed into that. So I know that some of your supporters and community on your Instagram page and in your social circle have asked some questions, and we're going to try our best to hit on those questions. If you've listened to this podcast before, everybody listening,
Mm-hmm.
and you too, Noelle, you know that we just kind of go all over the place.
Yes.
But one thing I do want to ask about in regards to the surgery that you had done, because you did lose a lot of weight and you did have to have some excess skin removed. I want to ask some questions around that. And then for those that are listening, I want to go with Noelle deeper into her story beyond her weight loss, which will probably be woven in throughout the time that we're talking, because all of that really stems from, it's a symptom of something else. Very similar
Absolutely.
to the people in the community of Blushing Phoenix, that it's a symptom of something else. And it's what we think about that thing that really spirals us into these deeper avenues. And we think if we could solve this one problem, then this will be the cure of everything. And I'm really
Right.
excited to link your story in, because I think for anybody listening, they'll be able to see that it was a symptom to something else. But with that
Right.
said, you did have to have a major surgery done. You told me what,
Yes.
11 hours?
Yes. 11 hours of surgery.
Yeah, so you
It
lose all
was,
this weight, you have all this excess skin. Talk a little bit about, okay, so now you've lost weight, but you've got this
mhm.
part of you still hanging around, and just the emotional impact of that, the surgery, and then what your expectations were. Just kind of let that go where you want it to go so that people can hear a little bit
Okay.
about your surgery.
After I lost the weight, I lost it so fast. I was, Chris calls me a teetotaler. So, those of you who don't know who Chris is, he is my ex husband, also a dear friend of mine. But he was like, Noelle, you're a teetotaler. You go big or you go home. And he is so right. I went really big, literally. And then it was time to take it back in and reel it all in. And so I started losing the weight. I was getting all of this amazing attention. And I just continued to shrink, shrink, and shrink to the point, where I became obsessed with my weight loss. And I got down to, this is very unhealthy. I was eating a piece of cheese to satisfy any type of hunger pain that I was having. I was working out twice a day. I could not get enough attention. I could not lose enough weight. And it became very obsessive and sick. So the reason I share that is because that's how fast I lost the weight. And when you tend to lose the weight more quickly, you tend to have more excess skin, is from what I've been told. I don't know how true that statement is, but I just know that that plays a role in the excess skin. But I did lose, at the time, 220 pounds. So that there was going to be a lot of excess skin, no matter how you look at it. There's talk all over the internet by you can avoid excess skin. You can't avoid it. When you stretch out your skin to over 400 pounds, you're naturally going to have excess skin. So I remember thinking, I would love to have that surgery. I can't afford to have that surgery. I have 5 kids. We're a family of 7. We could never afford to do anything like this. So I did start looking into what happened was I was a 58 triple I in my chest when I started my journey. And I ended up at a 36G. So they had shrunk and had excess skin, but they were still very large. So now on my smaller frame, I was having like permanent dents in my arms from wearing 2 bras at a time to keep the girls where they belong. And I was starting to have some back trouble. And so they were giving me a lot of trouble. So I thought, this is what I need to get done. I need to get breast reduction. If I don't get excess skin removal, that's fine. I just need my breast reduced. So I went and saw a surgeon here through insurance. That did not work out. And then I tried to see a surgeon where I pay out of pocket. They quoted me $50,000. And then I started following this incredible surgeon in Tijuana, Mexico. I saw his work and it was phenomenal. I'd seen other patients that had gone through him. And I stalked him for 2 years because I thought, who's going to go to Tijuana, Mexico? Like, really, come on, I'm not trying to die. You know what I mean? I want to live. I have 5 children. Why would I go to Tijuana, Mexico? on someone's kitchen table and have myself gutted like a fish and just end up dead, right? So I stalked him, but I saw his work and I was like, my gosh, his work is phenomenal. So while stalking him, I started stalking all his patients that he was sharing. I would find them on Instagram and I'd reach out to them. I'd DM all kinds of questions. Nobody had anything negative to say. The one negative comment I got from one person was the nurse the night before surgery could not catch a vein. And I was like, oh gosh, if that's the worst of my concerns, I got this. You know what I mean? So I kept stalking him, kept commenting on his stuff. And he's like, when are you going to come see me? And I was like, oh gosh, I don't know. I'm scared, I'm nervous or whatever. But anyways, I ended up just deciding, you know what, it's time. Let me just see how much this is going to cost. So I started talking to him just about breast reduction. And then we talked about the rest of my skin. My breast reduction was not too bad price wise. And then we talked about the rest of my skin and he gave me a quote. And I was like, back then, and it was about a fourth or a third of what I was going to pay here in the States. And I thought, wow, like that is a steal. Let me see what I can do. So started saving up my money and I was like, I think I'm ready to do this. So I finally booked with him and scheduled it. And I thought, I can't believe I'm doing this. This is absolutely amazing. I knew that I needed to reduce my breast, but the fact that I was going to get excess skin removal on my upper body was huge because I have not really been ashamed of my excess skin. I don't want to say I'm ashamed of it. Of course, we have natural insecurities about it, right? But a part of it was my trophy. Like, I did this. I worked so hard. I finally am proud of something outside of being a childhood gymnast. I mean, I was well into my adulthood. You know what I mean? Like 16 years into 18 years into my adulthood. And I had felt like I had nothing to be proud of. And I finally had something to be proud of. So I would even go out in a bikini and be like, dude, I did this. Not because I'm trying to flaunt it to the world, but like, it's like, I did this. I worked so hard. I'm really proud of myself. And I will say at the time, it was so nice to hear, oh my gosh, what did you do? How'd you do that? So anyways, I went in and booked the surgery and went down there and I was terrified at first. I'd been to Tijuana as a child numerous times. My family used to go down there, but it had been years and you hear all kinds of horror stories. I, of course, did my research on Dr. Galvez. He is like family to me today, but I did all my research on him, found out he was board certified, and, really dove in to make sure I was going to be safe and come home to my 5 kids. So booked the surgery, went down to Mexico, and my gosh, the facilities were phenomenal. The people were phenomenal. The surgery, I know people tell me all the time, oh my gosh, that must have been the most difficult surgery you've ever been through. It was the easiest. And I will tell you, I would rather have a skin removal than a toothache or a root canal. We talked about this recently, April. Like it was a breeze compared to a root canal. And I know that sounds crazy, especially the amount of work that I had done, 11 hours with the surgery. But it went by and it was such an easy surgery physically, but mentally, it was one of the toughest things I'd ever been through. Because to be a 400-pound woman that sat on the sidelines of her family and in the background, literally sitting, to losing a dramatic amount of weight, to becoming incredibly active, working out twice a day, I now was forced to sit still for 6 weeks. And I did not realize how much that would derail my mental health. And it did, because I started to feel like 400-pound Noelle again. And after an 11-hour surgery, you feel very heavy, right? You're very heavy for a couple of weeks. I mean, it's just a natural response of anesthesia, right? Where your body is just, you get winded very easily. So that immediately brought me back to 400-pound Noelle. And I thought, oh my gosh. I mean, I was devastated. It just felt like, am I going to be able to stick to this goal of mine? And that is to maintain a healthy lifestyle. I mean, how am I not going to go right back to food, not being active? And what if I don't become active again? I mean, so many things were going through my mind at that time that to be forced to sit still and sit in what my journey was over the last couple of years was really hard. I had not sat still, April. I had just been going and going and going and fighting and fighting and fighting. And to sit in all of that and not be prepared to sit in all of that it was really, really tough. I tell everybody, this excess skin removal journey is all mental. It was not physical. There was no suffering and pain. I was uncomfortable. I just couldn't laugh or sneeze because I had a 6-inch muscle repair from being 400 pounds, giving birth to Layla. So I had a 6-inch muscle repair where he pulled my muscles in together. That was the most painful part. And even then, it was very rare that I was in any type of pain throughout the surgery. So it was all mental. And that's now what I'm preparing myself for. And I'm glad that I've already had this surgery and I'm going in for my second round in October because I'm able to prepare myself for those 6 weeks of just sit still and be.
Yeah, it's
So,
it's amazing because as you're talking about the 6 weeks of just sitting and like thinking, and it's all mental at that point.
mhm.
You made the comment about the root canal situation because I've been on my like deathbed over the past week
Mhm.
because I had a root canal retreatment. I've been talking about it on everything. But
Yeah.
one thing that I shared, everything's metaphorical to me, so it's never just a root canal retreatment.
Right.
Never just, an interaction at the grocery store. It's like
Right.
it's a life metaphor. And one thing that I was thinking about because I'm pretty recovered now at this point,
Oh, good.
it was last night I told my husband, I'm like, I feel no pain for the first time in over a week. And so even though it's like, okay, it's a week, but it was such intense pain for such a long time
Mhm.
that it's what one thing I can think about coming out and feeling like I'm not in that pain as much anymore is that I was in the shower this morning and I thought, so I just returned to life now? Like I just go back to normal? Because what I think about that is I've been through so many seasons of my life where I've had to sit with my feelings and sit with my thoughts and I can't run away. And just like you're saying, going into this next surgery, you know what to expect. You'll be more prepared. You've done a lot of work also on yourself to be prepared for that.
Right.
And I think the thing for me, even in this metaphorical sense of being able to sit with myself for a good week in pain, is you get to know yourself a little bit more. You get to know like what screams at you, where if you have self-awareness and you do, you're
Yes.
sitting with the like, what was I doing before? I can't really move beyond this moment now. So it makes me sit with the anxiety and sit with like a lot of things for me really started to unravel over the past week. Just creative places where I've been stuck, identity places where I've been stuck all over a tooth issue and
Yeah.
pain and having to just sit with it because I couldn't really do anything else. And speaking of that from a mental and emotional place, because you get all this weight off of you, you're now going to have this new body because you're removing this extra weight that, like you said, to some sense is your trophy of the work that you've done. But
Right.
also, it's one thing when we kind of become somebody new in our mind, but you're transforming in your mind and your body is transforming at the same time. So, with your weight loss journey, all of that validation, doing the work, having everybody champion you, having your own internal struggles to a certain degree, then you have a shift where
Mhm.
the outside applaud is it's noise to some degree. It's
Correct.
the hole in you is getting bigger. It's not really filling you up anymore. It's almost like it's an addiction of its own. If you've ever been seeking the outside validation, it's just never enough and it runs dry and or you're constantly checking for praise. So you had a shift that happened for you that really started to unravel and really started to transform Noelle. Talk a little
Yeah.
bit about what was that moment on your journey that really started that unfolding to something deeper, more than the weight loss.
In 2016, I started my journey. In 2017, I'm well into my weight loss journey. I'm down 200 or so pounds at this time, and I am getting so much attention at this point. And boy, am I eating it up because I was, you know, I always felt as a child that I was overlooked. My brothers always got all of the attention, and so that kind of just continued into my adulthood where I just kind of fell back into the sidelines. So the fact that I was getting all of this attention just filled this very empty void I had in me, and I could not get enough of it. And I remember, losing 100 pounds and feeling like Chris did not make a big deal about that. And this is nothing negative towards Chris because he is a beautiful human being, but he was just not one that made a big deal about situations like this. And I needed him to respond both for my father and as my husband. And I didn't know that at the time. Clearly, I was not unaware of that. So I was not getting the support from Chris like I needed. And then I lost 200 pounds. And again, I'm getting all this attention on Instagram and everybody around me. And Chris was like, oh, high five, good job. You know, what's for dinner tonight? You know what I mean? So for him, it naturally caused some insecurities within himself because he's seeing his wife get all kinds of attention. And this is again nothing negative towards Chris because I would have felt the same exact way about Chris had he been on this beautiful journey and getting all this attention. I probably would have responded the same way, like, "Hey, you're getting all this attention elsewhere. You don't need me, to give you any type of attention." So I'm like, because of that, and this is not again, I'm trying to be careful with my words here because this is not to blame anyone but myself, but um I was getting so much attention online. There was one person online that was incredibly supportive throughout my journey. I'm not sure what their true intentions were, but to me, it was a platonic friendship. But they would reach out every couple of months, like, oh, I see you're struggling on this part when you posted in your stories or your Instagram page that you were struggling here. Here, try this, try that. You're doing great. I'm so proud of you. Keep up the great work. And at this point, I didn't really know this person. I knew they were another influencer, but they did not share anything about their journey on Instagram at this point. They were focused on everyone else's journey, whether it was wrapped around drug addiction, physical transformation, mental health, mainly physical transformation, including anorexia, bulimia, weight loss, weight gain, all of that. And he was very supportive throughout the journey. And he, um, towards, 1 year into my journey, when I've lost all of this weight, I was getting all this attention from him. I made a very poor decision to step out on my marriage and have an affair with him.